This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name is Eben Jansen. The show is live. It's broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now with our whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. Today, we look at the threat the Ebola virus has for the wider economy of South Africa and the continent. We also look at the latest truce that's been signed in Gaza. Will it last, is the question. And we also talk illegal electricity connections and prostitution, separate issues, a little bit later. First, Katrine Malan has a news update.
Well, hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Katrine Malan, and let's take a look at the top stories this morning.
تعلن موافقة القيادة الفلسطينية على دعوة مصر الشقيقة لوقف إطلاق النار الشامل والدائم ابتداء من الساعة 7 من مساء هذا اليوم بتوقيت القاهرة وفلسطين.
Well, celebrations have erupted in Gaza as a long-term ceasefire agreed by Israel and the Palestinians began, ending 50 days of the deadliest violence in a decade. Egypt, which brokered the ceasefire, says Israel has also given permission for aid convoys to travel to Gaza. Meanwhile, South African humanitarian organization The Gift of the Givers has left for the Gaza Strip with millions of rands worth of medical supplies. Liberia's Ebola crisis will likely worsen in weeks to come. That's the warning from the country's president, Eben Jansen. In an email response to the Wall Street Journal, Sirleaf said that it is unlikely that we are yet at the peak of Ebola spread. To date, Ebola has killed 1,426 people in West Africa, with nearly half of the deaths in Liberia. Then back in South Africa, EFF MPs could face suspension from the National Assembly. Speaker Baleka Mbete says she's considering action against the party over its disruptive behavior last week during questions to President Jacob Zuma.
To this end, I am affording the members concerned an opportunity to give reasons in writing why they should not be suspended.
Public Protector Thuli Madonsela has told politicians to stop interfering with her work. The ANC earlier severely criticized Madonsela, saying she is discrediting the ruling party. However, it does not want to see Madonsela vacate her office before the end of her term. The party's Secretary-General Gwede Mantashe says there is a perception that Madonsela is always trying to get the attention of the media.
Of major concern among other unfortunate actions is the conduct has been the public protector going on road shows, including international trips where she speaks on matters that are still under process. The NWC also noted the coincidence of the public protector writing the letter to the president exactly on the same day as the EFF disrupt parliament.
And the conduct of teachers at a Johannesburg school is under investigation after a video surfaced showing a learner suffering a severe asthma attack. The cell phone video footage was taken as the learner had the attack. Fellow pupils offered to help while a security guard, as shown on the footage, could not be bothered. It was alleged that teachers who saw him just before the video was taken simply walked away. Now remember, all these top stories are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Katrine. Earlier this week, the United Nations cautioned against flight restrictions into and out of Ebola-affected countries in West Africa, saying such limitations are preventing the transport of critically needed health workers and supplies, as well as contributing to economic and diplomatic isolation of the region. This week, questions were raised when South African Airways announced its decision to continue its service on its West African routes. And here to provide more clarity about this decision is SAA spokesperson, Mr. Tladi Tladi. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us. Also joining us from Pretoria, we're joined by the Chief Executive Officer of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, Matsatsi Ramawela. Very good morning to you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Eben, and good morning to the viewers of SABC.
If I can start with you here in studio, Mr. Tladi, the risk you had to assess when making this decision is actually not such a high risk in the end. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Perhaps a starting point has to be, for one, to draw a distinction between SAA operations different from other carriers that operate in the region. Whilst it is true that we operate in that region between Johannesburg and other destinations in West Africa, SAA operates to 5 destinations in West Africa, and these have not been classified as high-risk areas, following a cabinet statement that was issued on this Ebola outbreak in West Africa. Our position is that of the 5 destinations that we fly to, only one has been affected, that is Nigeria, and it is regarded as a medium risk. In other words, the total ban as a result of the statement that was issued by Cabinet relates to the 3 countries that have been hit the hardest by the outbreak.
How do you assess that risk, and how do you, in the end, cover the downside?
We take our cue from government. We also take into account the position that is outlined by the World Health Organization, as well as the International Air Transport Association, as well as the International Air Transport Organization, all of which have indicated that we can continue to operate in that region, which is consistent with what you've indicated in your opening remarks.
I want to go to Pretoria quickly to just talk about the business side of things. So, Romawela, if you can tell us how business between South Africa and the entire West African region has been affected by this outbreak.
Well, Eben, I'm not able to indicate in terms of giving you figures as to the effect or the impact of the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. All I can say is that there has been concern and a growing element of panic in the industry here in South Africa because, as you know, the international community, or for that matter, our key source markets, don't make the distinction between, where is South Africa and where is Liberia, for instance. They just think, there is this outbreak which is happening in Africa, and immediately people start thinking about cancelling their trip to come to our part of the world. And this is the major thing we're dealing with at the moment. But in terms of business coming from West Africa, obviously, we are watching what airlines like South African Airways are doing. And we're quite pleased that South African Airways is, being cautiously responding to this outbreak and taking their key from government in terms of the specific areas where this total ban has to take place in the interest of balancing the needs of business and also the need of supporting our African neighbors.
How do you communicate this message, though, to the international community?
So far, what we've been saying, again, we've been taking our cue as well from the Department of Health, what they've been saying, and also from the World Health Organization, what they've been saying as well. And with those messages, and of course from the Government Communication Services, the GCIS, what they've been saying to us is that there just has to be caution. And the latest, communication that came out from the Minister of Health, which is restricting travel to West Africa, specifically to those countries that are very hard hit, we take a cue from that, and then we keep our members informed. The big thing, as I mentioned earlier, is simply for us to make sure that we keep our members here in South Africa and within the region informed, so that when their counterparts coming from other parts of the world, express their concern that their clients want to cancel, and they give perspective. Because a lot of people, it's all about perception. So if we right where we are right now, our biggest challenge that we're dealing with the perception to make sure that people still feel safe to come to South Africa, but also to come to Southern Africa and other parts of the continent that are really not touched by this epidemic.
Perception is really the scenario that plays up. We saw in the DRC, new cases have been announced there, and suddenly there's a sort of mass hysteria that goes. How do you manage that perception, especially, as the national carrier, but also then how do you manage airports and so forth to not create that hysteria?
I think one of the key things here is really about information, understanding what we know about Ebola, what Ebola is and what Ebola is not. You know, we have had cases where our passengers have raised concerns where there was a suspicion that the virus could be transmitted within the cabin.
Yeah.
All of us understand that the disease is not airborne, so transmission does not take place, through air circulation, but it is through contact with bodily fluids. So it is important that you communicate that information. Secondly, the point that was raised by the other guest in Pretoria, there has been confusion about the location of our country and where we operate from. It has been taken for granted that if South Africa is on the African continent, then it means that all these other countries that are in the West African region are simply our neighbors. So it is important that you continue to pump out the message about things that you need to do and things that you need to desist from doing. And that is what we're doing on an ongoing basis.
If I can talk to you quickly, Mr. Ebola, about the business side of it. We've got over 1,000 South Africans working in West Africa right now. What can South African companies then do to ensure the safety of their workers, but also then guard against the spread?
I think even the most important thing is, as Ladi is saying, it's really information. We have to understand what is this epidemic, and most importantly, how is it transmitted, and most importantly, what are those symptoms, and then when we pick up that somebody has those kind of symptoms, we know, I've heard from some of our colleagues who have been, traveling in and out of South Africa, that there's some stringent measures at our port of entries, both, the airports, I know with the borders, the harbors, and also the land borders. There's been some serious stringent measures that have been put in place that people, whether you are indicating any symptoms or not, there's a measure that allows you to be able to screen so that we can really do all we can to be able to make sure we keep this disease out of the country. But specifically in terms of how can we as businesses protect our workers who are working in those markets, and also how we can also protect our tourists, it's all about information. Really making sure that people are not dealing and responding on all this epidemic based on what they hear on the street. It's facts on the ground. And that's why when something comes up from us, from the Tourism Business Council point of view and our members, when anything that comes up, we check with the Department of Health. What are they saying? What are the World Health Organization saying? And lately we also have made contact with the airports company of South Africa, and to be able to also understand what are the measures from their side that they're taking. And I can assure, without taking responsibility, because this is not my place, we are just citizens in the business community. But we know that the South African government and everybody that is involved is really doing everything in its power to be able to make sure we protect our people, we provide information, but at the same time be very supportive of our neighbors in West Africa, because after all, it doesn't matter even how much explanation, how much information we're giving. Everybody still perceives that Liberia is next door to South Africa. They think Zambia is next to Nigeria or something. And as long as we're going to be, we must not also say it's about South Africa. It's about the whole continent. That we provide perspective in terms of jurisdiction, but also in terms of supporting that, where this affected and how can people deal with it.
Well, thank you very much for clearing that up for us. I've got some friends who think South Africa is next to Mexico in the United States. So I completely understand what you are telling us this morning. Thank you for joining us live from Pretoria. That's the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, Matsatsi Ramawala, giving us a real view into how the world views us in the end. It's probably a little bit funny for us here, but it's not really funny in the bigger sense. Wanted to ask you, though, about bums on seats. Are you noticing Ebola having an effect on bums on seats in aircraft, and maybe a slight decrease on routes, or is there a general decrease towards the African continent at the moment?
Indeed, there is some impact, although it is not a huge an impact. We have had some cancellations when you look at our South American, North American, and Asian markets. We have had some cancellations, and one of the key things that we have done was to take a decision to liaise directly with those affected markets in order to communicate information. However, in relation to our operations from Johannesburg to West Africa, there hasn't been any major decrease. We continue to operate in terms of our frequencies. We have not done any downgrading in terms of the aircraft size that we operate with.
Well, that's the good news. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, the spokesperson of South African airways, Mr. Hladi, clearing up for us. Well, Ebola is having an impact on the entire African continent, including us. But information is the key, as you've heard, and let's not spread mass hysteria. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Now, school kids in the usually sleepy town of Colesberg in the Northern Cape may have been surprised to see a large police contingent at school this morning. But the men and women in blue are in the area to launch a community outreach project aimed at making schools safer places. The launch was led by the Deputy Minister of Police, Maggie Sochu, and is part of a bigger plan to ensure that children can learn without having to look over their shoulders. Our Northern Cape reporter Ulrich Hendricks was with the police at the launch and joins us live from Colesberg. He's also with a guest, but before you carry on with the interview, Ulrich, just set the scene for us.
Well, I don't think Colesberg in the Northern Cape, like you said, is a very sleepy hollow, has ever seen so much police within this town. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of police people in the town. Every point, every corner that you basically take, you see police people here. Like you said, the Deputy Police Minister is here, as well as the National Commissioner, Ria Piega. They are visiting schools where they've targeted, where they feel that it is appropriate to launch the Safer School Awareness Campaign. Well, with me is the chair of the school governing body of the OMSU High School in Colesberg, that is Colin Williams, and he'll just sketch to us, why do you think it's necessary for this Safe Schools Awareness Campaign within the school?
Thank you very much, Ulrich. It's very important for us to work hand in glove with the police to ensure that we are having safe schools and to ensure that we're having a hand in glove relationship with the police as a whole. So I believe for us starting this program today, it will just start to bear fruit. When you talk about UMSO High School, UMSO is basically the factory of all the products that you can see around Colesberg and even up to the Northern Cape as a whole.
But what kind of problems have you been experiencing here? What elements are we talking about?
The normal challenges that we are facing here, especially at school, are more drug-related at times, because children are at this stage where they are in a stage of experimenting with all kinds of drugs and things and the likes. But nothing that is beyond our power and beyond the power of the police as such. We have a hand-in-glove relationship with them, and they respond as soon as we contact them for any challenges that we are facing.
Any violence reported at the school?
Like I said, most of the things are minor, and it's I can recall one or two occasions where things were really almost out of hand, but with the quick response of the police, we managed to get everything back to normal.
What kind of relationship are you looking to have with the police going forward as part of the Safer Schools campaign?
What is important for us is, apart from policing, we need to have a much more closer relationship in terms of we're having social challenges as well, and I understand the police are also having their department as well, so that the police can be, again, like they used to say in the olden days, the friend of the learners in particular. That's what we try to create and to establish, especially with the police now.
Are you looking forward to more patrols or police visiting the school, coming into the premises, walking around a bit, etc.?
The situation is not at that stage where you need a hands-on approach from the side of the police. What we want to work on is to ensure that the police are on standby when we're having challenges. It's not like they have to come and be like you're having in the Western Cape, where the police are supposed to be there 24/7. The only thing is that when we call them, for them to respond. But we believe what is in place now, the relationship that are in place, or the things that are in place, we can work together and take this thing forward.
Do you have the buy-in of the students of the school?
100%. The students, the staff, the rest of the SGB, we are all together in this thing, and we believe together we can do more.
Thank you very much. That's Colin Williams. He's the chair of the student governing or school governing body at Umsu High School here in Colesberg. This program will, of course, be rolled out to other provinces nationally. We know the Western Cape and Gauteng are hotspots when it comes to violence in school, etc. So they're looking forward to rolling these out to other schools as well. But that's it from us for now. Eben?
Thank you very much, Ulrich. As always, Ulrich on the spot, bringing us almost live action right there, telling us what's happening in the schools. Surprising that they're launching it at schools in Colesberg, but I can tell you that all schools around the country face similar problems of safety and criminal elements wanting to work their way onto the school ground. So, fantastic initiative, and let's hope it goes and works around the country. Time for us to take a look at what your thoughts are, well, what you're thinking about and talking about this morning. Inform and Engage says stopping all flights going from to Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea ain't going to stop the spread of Ebola virus. Need more aid, says Inform and Engage. Lakshmi Subramani says Ebola is mostly killing women due to traditional role as caregivers and a high number in the health workforce. Gender. British Airways extends suspension of flights to Sierra Leone on 31 December due to Ebola. Umaru Fofana says this, and if that is the case, well, it's one of the few big airlines that's stopped right. Beyond X says, so regulating flights' only way of containing Ebola, that's breeding ground for a bigger epidemic, says Beyond X. Yes, everyone's aware there. Kate Dooley says, really quite shocked that British Airways has suspended all flights to Sierra Leone and Liberia until 2015. That he says, Kate Dooley. Yes, some would say a little bit short-sighted. We've just heard from our very own spokesperson of South African Airways that the risk is medium at this time and it is not very high. But that's where we live. Let's take a look at the front pages from around the globe today. Now, international, New York Times has a picture of Palestinians celebrating in the streets of Gaza. There, as a ceasefire between Israel and Palestine appears to be holding. Papers in Latin America showing some of those celebratory scenes in Gaza and in Paris. Newspapers are looking at Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Ukrainian counterpart Petro Poroshenko's recent meeting. The two heads of state met to try and ease tension between their countries after 5 months of separatists' unrest there. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. We'll be back after a short break.
We really know the hype is about the new and how about the new cabinet will actually perform. But what role should then the media be playing at this critical stage?
I would hope that the media will give the newly appointed people a benefit of the doubt.
Has the media lost its respect in this regard? We want you to tell us.
The many factors that are hidden from the public in terms of this ought to be brought out by the media.
Watch Media Monitor with me, Alicia Jali, Sundays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News channel.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Illegal connections are extremely dangerous because incorrect wiring is used. Government estimates that electricity theft costs South Africa a massive 4.4 billion rand every single year. These funds have to be made up somewhere else. When Eskom applies for a tariff increase, the National Energy Regulator decides how much Eskom can recover from increasing tariffs. So we all end up paying for the stolen electricity, it seems. A solution to all illegal connection and meter tampering has been found with the introduction of smart metering system. Now, to talk to us about the smart card, we have the CEO of Zandile Management Services, Mr. Fikile Bili, with us this morning. Good morning, sir.
Morning,
thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do we have a silver bullet in our hands now to deal with the problem of illegal connections?
Yeah, I think I can proudly say that South African issues should be resolved by South Africans, because on the ground we understand the dynamics. For example, we as Zandile Management Services, we are in the space of municipality doing revenue enhancement and debt collection and etc. But we've discovered that their debt will never be reduced. They will keep on owing Eskom, and then the community will keep on owing municipality. Then we developed our own meter, which use only radio frequency. You don't have to put meters inside a house. You basically put meters on a pole, which use GPRS, Wi-Fi to connect electricity in order to save Eskom and municipality cable theft, to do away with cable theft. And we've done that, and then we are busy going to roll out pilots also in some provinces in South Africa, as we'll be doing in Botswana. Now, the nicest part about this thing is that it is going to transfer more skills to municipal employees. We have also developed a meter which is prepaid for water, because a lot of people are complaining about consumption. You leave for Durban for the weekend, you come back, your bill is 4,000 rand, but you were not there. So it's better you use the Zandile Management Services prepaid water. And then we developed also a conventional meter, which is postpaid.
Yeah.
You don't have to send a meter reader to your house to read your meters, because your walls are closing your gates. You can use the Zandile application by using your smartphone and read your own meters and send it to the municipality.
That takes a whole lot of the risk out of the scenario. I wanted to ask you, though, on the ground, when we deal with electricity theft, it costs South Africa billions. We know that. Do you think, you mentioned being in contact on the ground, do you think that people are aware of the damage that electricity theft causes?
The unique part about Zandile Management Services is that if you go on YouTube or you Google Operation Badala, we do what we call door-to-door campaign. We re-educate our people the importance of saving electricity and keeping paying municipal services in order for them to prepare them for change. Because you cannot just come in, for someone who's been stealing electricity for 12 years and come in and install a prepaid or a smart intelligent meter. That person is going to cause a disorderly situation. That's why we find it very easy for us to go on the ground and teach the people. And the nicest part about these meters is that municipalities don't need money.
Yeah.
They don't need money. I can proudly say we have the funding model to assist municipalities to install prepaid water meters, including mobile vending system, without having to budget for it or seek for assistance from Treasury.
Do you think that these communities where we see these illegal connections happening, do you think these communities are getting to a space where we are ready to start paying for the service?
Everything is educational. I don't believe people are delinquent. If we've got a culture of non-payment, you don't expect that people don't pay SABC TV license. SABC go on a campaign.
Yes.
SABC,
we have to ask very nicely.
Yes. So we are doing the same thing as SABC is doing, having the nice approach to talk to people. We also offer sometimes some benefits. Sometimes we ask municipalities to install the meters, but they don't have the money. But the fortunate part is that we have the money to do it for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is part of the Operation Batala that you are busy with. Batala means
pay
to
up.
pay or pay up.
Yes.
How is this going? And give us a little bit more information around this, the operation that you are running.
Okay, what happens is that we engage the municipalities. We understand that SABC, for instance, is the most popular channel. We can take you from SABC. We can take you from SABC soaps. We go with them door to door. If people see people from Generations, for example, people from Movango, Save the Land, they relate with those people because they see them on SABC. Yes. So it becomes easy for us to contact with them. So in a way, we use SABC without SABC knowing, you know. But the nicest thing is that
you are stealing our electricity.
No. I'm stealing your people. But your people, because of you are the biggest channel, your people assist us to go and meet the people. I mean, it's so nice for people to see people from Generations and Movango coming with Zandile Management Services, and we come and talk the problems that they are facing.
How long do you think before we can eradicate this, be wireless or cableless in this scenario, and root out the evil that is electricity theft?
How long?
How long sort of time frame would you say in South Africa?
We need another 10 years. But we also need to change the mindset of the political landscape. You know, if you are a councillor, you need to be on the ground and be with your people and teach your people the importance of paying municipal services.
This year we have the smart metering box. Is that right?
If you
just point out to us the points of difference in how it works quickly.
Pick up you see there on top there's the illegal connections.
Yes, those are the illegal connections, as we know, and
yes,
and the effects are almost terrible.
You can see that people on the stairs trying to breach electricity. It's due for them all.
Yeah.
You can see that meter tampering, how people are tampering on meters.
Yeah.
But if you go up, can you have a slide there?
Yeah.
You see there, those meters, we put them in one pole. Is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 houses will use one box.
We'll use one box.
If you open that box, that meter is going to trip.
Yeah.
You need to send a job card for that meter to work. If you look there, you see how clean is it?
Yeah.
This is the Zandile Management Services System. There's no human intervention. There's no wires going from there to the house. You can't see that. So there's no human. It's like your MTN cell phone bill. You know, it's a contract phone. You get your bill electronically.
Well, we hope that the 10-year time frame you put in front of us is really the silver bullet, or the period that we need to sort out this problem, because it costs lives and it costs a lot of money out of the economy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, as the latest ceasefire between Israel and Palestine aimed at ending the 7-week conflict in Gaza appears to be holding, the conflict in the Middle East has claimed the lives of more than 2,000 people and has left more than 11,000 wounded. Now, to talk to us about just how dire the situation has been after recently returning from the Gaza Strip, we are joined from Durban by Norwegian emergency surgeon Dr. Mats Gilbert. Good morning, Dr. Gilbert. Thank you for joining us on Newsroom.
Good morning, and thanks to you for having me.
Doctor, we saw celebrations erupt overnight in Gaza. Just tell us what you have seen and dealt with during the last 50 days of this violence.
Well, I think it's time to celebrate, absolutely, for the Palestinian people in Gaza, but it's also time to mourn their killed and wounded. And in particular, I think many families are mourning the death of their children. 491 Palestinian children have been killed by the Israeli bombing, and more than 3,000 Palestinian children have been injured. And these wounds will take many, many years to heal. So it's been an extremely extraordinary, dreadful situation during the last 50 days and nights with relentless Israeli bombing. And the new thing, I've been in Gaza through the last 4 attacks, 2006, 2009, 2012, and now 2014. And the particular thing this time has been the way the Israeli forces have been demolishing residential areas very systematically.
Yeah.
So more than 16,000 housing units have been destroyed, and more than 100,000 Palestinians are now without any place to live. So there is a huge internal refugee problem on top of the massive destruction of the civilian infrastructure.
That's really concerning. The other report that we have from other humanitarian organizations that have been working in Gaza the last 2 months, really, Doctor, they have reports that ambulances have been targeted, medical missions have been targeted, hospitals have been targeted directly and on purpose. Do you share that same view after returning from there?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the UN reports are confirming these attacks on the medical system. There is a large number of ambulances that have been targeted, and unfortunately, 10th of ambulance personnel and other medical staff have been killed by the Israeli forces. 24 health institutions have been more or less damaged by the bombing, and 4 of Gaza's 14 hospitals have been forced to close due to the bombing. I visited myself one of them, the Mustashfa Mohammed al-Durra Pediatric Hospital outside Gaza City, the day after it was bombed. 40 staff and patients were injured. And this is quite new. I mean, Israel, it seems like the State of Israel is not respecting any international humanitarian laws or the Geneva Convention. So patients could not feel safe even when they were inside the hospitals. And this is, in a way, a very brutal attack on the whole civilian society and rendering nobody safe and rendering nobody protected by international law. I think this is a responsibility for other parts of the world, like South African people and the Norwegian people, to stand up and say that we don't accept that Israel can treat the Palestinians in this way year after year after year. This is not a conflict. This is an illegal occupation and a state using armed forces to oppress a whole people. This cannot go on.
Doctor, I read a quote. You said Hamas is not the enemy Israel is fighting, but that Israel is waging a war against Palestine's will to resist. Can you just explain what you meant when you said that?
Well, I meant that in the rhetorics of, or the propaganda of this war scenery from Israel and from the United States, it's been portrayed as a fight between democracy and terrorism, between Israel and Hamas, when in fact this is actually the Palestinian people exercising their right to resist occupation, which is anchored in the international laws. So this is, I mean, in Gaza, anybody, you can talk to anybody. It's not Hamas opposing the attacks from Israel. It's the people of Palestine. They say we've had enough. And we've been bombed, we've been isolated, we've been under siege for 8 years now. And the last ceasefire in 2012 was we were cheated, and we don't want this anymore. We want to have the siege lifted, we want the bombing to stop, we want to live as free people. So it's a very simplistic way to portray this as some political struggle between Hamas and Israel. This is actually a popular resistance against occupation and against oppression. In many ways, the same resistance that you had during your struggle against apartheid, because the politics of Israel today against the Palestinian people is truly a new and very aggressive form of apartheid.
Finally, Doctor, one always has to look forward. What would you like to see in the months and weeks to come? And do you think that medical personnel on the ground there can now do their work and deal with the situation there?
Well, evidently the most important thing that has happened is the ceasefire. Make no mistake, that's extremely important because that will stop the flow of injured and killed to the hospitals. But there is a huge challenge now to reconstruct the Palestinian civilian society. It's estimated that the Israeli bombing has caused a damage valued to between $6 and $8 billion. Pipelines, water pipelines, sewage systems, 240 schools, a large number of health institutions, large areas of residential buildings have to be reconstructed. So I hope that the siege is really lifted and that the borders are really being opened and that the international community can run to the support of the Palestinian people so that they can have some sort of new beginning, some sort of re-establishment of normality in life. And in particular, for the Palestinian children, bear in mind that the average age in Gaza is 17.8 years. It's a very young population, and they need peace. They need reconstruction. They need to be able to go to school and to see that life can have some sort of normality. And that is also our responsibility to see to it that that will happen and that this siege is not violated again by Israel.
Doctor, thank you very much for joining us this morning. That is a Norwegian emergency surgeon, Dr. Mats Gilbert, who joins us live from Durban. He's just returned from the Gaza Strip, giving us his views on what he's seen and encountered there. Let's take a look now at what you're talking about on social media. War has officially stopped. Alhamdulillah, Israel has finally accepted Hamas' condition for long-term ceasefire, says Cynthia. Avi Meyer says, going for a run, first time in many weeks. I won't be keeping my music down for fear of missing an incoming rocket siren. That's how real it is. Anna Diani says, finally there's peace in Gaza and Allah has answered our prayers. I was so happy I can't even describe the feeling I had when Palestine is free. There you have some pictures of the celebrations overnight. Thousands of people celebrating in the streets of Gaza for the victory, says Palestine. Alhamdulillah, victory for Gaza, #Gaza. Wonderful picture of some of the celebrations. Guess what? Farah Ghazan says celebrations in Gaza today because the war is finally over. Very real it is. Let's take a look at what's on our Facebook page now. War is very real, especially when you're in the middle of it. Now, on our Facebook page today, you will see there that Namibia's president has called on political parties to campaign peacefully ahead of this year's general election there in November. You'll also see that the World Health Organization has shut a laboratory in Sierra Leone after a health worker there was infected with a deadly Ebola virus, and that the EFF has lashed out at ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe for suggesting that the EFF would be colluding with the office of the Public Protector, Thuli Madonsela. You can find all of those stories and more on Newsroom's Facebook page. Now today we wish the politician and founder of the Inkatha Freedom Party, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, a very happy birthday. Buthelezi, who's also served as Minister of Home Affairs for 2 terms, turns 86 years young today. Now, on Election Day this year, Buthelezi made us all laugh when he was asked a bit of a different question by one of our SABC reporters. Have a look at this.
What did you have for breakfast?
Grapefruit, yogurt, 1 poached egg, and tea.
Very healthy.
Very, very healthy indeed. At 86 years old, I want to follow the great man's diet. It's time for us to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
Platinum producer Lonman says it may be forced to restructure its Rustenburg operations. That's if its employees fail to accept the company's latest wage offer and return to work.
We are concerned about things like strike action that become disruptive and lead to job losses.
NUMSA members downed tools demanding better working conditions.
NUMSA have called upon other members to embark on secondary strike.
Your world, weekdays between 11 and 12 midnight.
Well, hello and welcome back. You're with Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the top stories this morning. Celebrations have erupted in Gaza as a long-term ceasefire agreed by Israel and the Palestinians began, ending 50 days of the deadliest violence in a decade. Egypt, which brokered the ceasefire, says Israel has also given permission for aid convoys to travel to Gaza. Meanwhile, South African humanitarian organisation The Gift of the Givers has left for the Gaza Strip with millions of rands worth of medical supplies. Liberia's Ebola crisis will likely worsen in weeks to come. That's the warning from the country's President Eben Jansen Sirleaf. In an email response to the Wall Street Journal, Sirleaf said that it is unlikely that we are yet at the peak of Ebola spread. To date, Ebola has killed 1,426 people in West Africa, with nearly half of the deaths in Liberia. And back in South Africa, the conduct of teachers at a Johannesburg school is under investigation after a video surfaced showing a learner suffering a severe asthma attack. The cell phone video footage was taken as the learner had the attack. Fellow pupils offered to help, while a security guard, as shown in the footage, could not be bothered. It was alleged that teachers who saw him just before the video was taken and he had the attack simply walked away. Remember, all these top stories are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Now to Botswana for a follow-up on the case we covered earlier this year about antiretroviral treatment for foreign prisoners. Last week, Botswana's High Court ruled that government must provide treatment to HIV-positive foreign prisoners at the state's expense, and that the denial of antiretroviral treatment to foreign inmates violated their human rights. 2 Zimbabwean prisoners had sued the government for refusing to provide them with ARVs while providing them at no cost to Botswana citizens. Now, today we are joined by Priti Patel, the Deputy Director of the Southern Africa Litigation Centre, to tell us more. Priti, welcome to Newsroom.
Thank you for having me.
We had you a bit earlier this year. Can you just briefly recap this case for us, where it all started?
Sure. So this case actually started a few years ago with 2 Zimbabwean prisoners writing a letter to a nonprofit organization in Botswana asking them for their assistance in getting HIV treatment. And what the prisoners said was, because we're foreign prisoners, we're not given treatment, and we're worried that we are going to die if we don't get HIV treatment. And what this organization did was reached out to us and asked us for assistance, and we filed a case alleging that denying foreign prisoners HIV treatment violated their human rights.
Now, just take us through the court order that was made last week.
So the High Court, as you stated earlier, ruled that denying these prisoners ARV treatment, which is life-saving, violates fundamental constitutional rights, including their right to life, their right to be free from cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. And so what the court ordered was not only that these 2 prisoners get ARV treatment, but that all foreign prisoners in Botswana prisons be given ARV treatment.
Now, to your knowledge, how many foreign prisoners are in the prisons who are HIV positive?
So we actually have absolutely no information about that. And I think one of the things that the court actually said in its judgment was that the government was arguing that they didn't have enough money to give ARV treatment to foreign prisoners. And the court said, well, that's fine if you want to make that argument, but you have to provide us some information. And you provided us no information. You didn't tell us how many foreign prisoners were in prison, how many of them were HIV positive, and how much it would cost you. And if you're going to make that argument, you have to back it up.
Now, just moving forward now, what will happen?
So the government actually has 6 weeks to appeal this decision to the Court of Appeal, which is the highest court in Botswana. We're hoping that they decide not to do that and actually begin providing this life-saving treatment to foreign prisoners.
Well, Priti, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a quick update on this story on Botswana regarding HIV treatment for foreign prisoners in Botswana. Eben, over to you.
Yeah, thank you once again. Finally, with heightened risk of HIV and other sexually transmitted infections, sex workers are still marginalised and face substantial stigma and stereotype. Last week, the body of a beheaded prostitute was discovered in Durban. Over the years, the decriminalisation of sex work has been viewed as the only way to end the continued scourge of abuse in the profession. But others are concerned, saying legalising sex work could lead to moral decay in society. Now, to further the discussion, we are joined in studio by Diane Masawe, who is the Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force, SWET, Gauteng's Provincial Manager. Good morning. That was a mouthful.
Good morning, Evan. Good morning to your viewers.
What are some of the major issues and challenges that sex workers still face in South Africa today?
I think the fact that sex work is still seen as a crime is a huge challenge and a barrier for sex workers. Some of the challenges that sex work, and I think you mentioned in your clip, when you read that, is the fact that sex workers are being murdered by the numbers. In this month alone, we've heard of 2 sex workers who've been killed. There was the one in Durban who was beheaded. There was one in Cape Town who was stabbed. And actually on Friday at our head office in Cape Town, there's going to be a memorial service for sex workers who've been killed in this month, which is meant to be Women's Month.
Yeah.
So there's the violence issue.
Yeah.
There's constant harassment at the hands of the police. There's physical abuse at the hands of their clients, and also community members in some of the areas where they work in. There are times when there's been tensions, and I think even access to health is a challenge for sex workers, because healthcare professionals know that sex work is a crime, and we're also seeing it's doubly hard, especially for migrant sex workers, and also trans and MSM sex workers.
What do you say to the critics? They say one of the key points they're raising now is they say, well, if we legalise sex work, young girls would be attracted to the easy money in the profession. What do you say to that?
I mean, we think this is actually, it's not true. It's inaccurate. And we are basing this on our experiences working with sex workers in New Zealand, where sex work has been decriminalised and is regarded as work. And one of the things that New Zealand has done very well is they've put regulations around, how the sex work industry should be. And one of the things that, they've put, and I think also to mention, even here in South Africa, although as an organization we support sex workers, we don't support sexual exploitation of minors. And so we see anybody under the age of 18 who's working, we don't call that person a sex worker.
Yeah.
And we feel that if there was regulations around how the industry should operate, we can rely on sex workers themselves, but also their clients to come forward and report when they do see such instances, which they're not able to do at this moment in time, because for them to come forward, it means it's for them to out themselves either as a sex worker or as a client and risk prosecution.
Finally, quickly, we've got 30 seconds. Okay. What about the link with human trafficking and the legal process, or if it's legalized, that this could increase? What about that concern?
I think for starters, as an organization, we call for decriminalization of sex work, so not legalization. And, just before the World Cup, there were all these stories around, we're going to have a high number of people trafficked, for the World Cup. And, we did research, and there wasn't that many, we didn't count any person who was trafficked during the World Cup. So these are all myths by people who just, who don't want to recognize sex work as work and give sex workers their rights to do the work.
It has to be recognized at work. It's the oldest profession there is.
It is, but I think, some of the challenges are there that, hinder sex workers being able to work in a safe environment, and that's what we're calling for.
Well, we've run out of time. I would like us to continue this discussion, but I think we're going to have this discussion again on Newsroom. That's what we promised, because simply not enough time to get into the real detail of where we need to go. But Diane, thank you for joining us this morning. That's Diane Masawe, who is the Sweat Gauteng Provincial Manager. We're talking about, decriminalising, not legalising, decriminalising sex work in South Africa and what that means. Watch Newsroom. We will continue that discussion. We're broadcasting live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show then repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following day. We're also live on YouTube at that time with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.